Imperial Lounge presents an icon.
Reggae dancehall by the beach. To be held at Imperial Lounge, 2 to 14 High Street, Margate Seafront, Kent, CT9 180. To be held on the first Saturday of each month. Your host DJ Matt. Also rotating DJs, Roddy Boone, DJ Happy,
and Younger General.
Doors open 8 p.m. till late. Free entry all night. Music policy, reggae, dancehall, and a touch of soul. On the first Saturday of each month. Reggae dancehall by the beach. At the Imperial Lounge Margate. Do remember, you can also get VIP and shisha booking. More info on the World Jam Global website. That's www.worldjamglobal.com. Also www.imperialloungemargate.co.uk.
See you there.
Use them, it's the right thing you doing. Rebellious like Malcolm. 1, 2, 3, swing it.
Do you have an old sound tape or your favorite cassette tape that you want converted to CD or MP3 format? Do you need a demo CD, radio ad, a DJ, or even a sound system for your wedding, birthday, or special occasion? Then why not get in contact with KTR Records on 07931 152 448, or check out our website on www.ktrrecords.com. We have been in business since 2004 and also undertake community projects. So for your remixes, doublets and all your sound editing needs, why not contact KTR Records, official sponsor of World Jam Global Radio. KTR Records, coming your way.
Do you like music like this?
Great music all the time.
Or like this?
The music you love.
Maybe this.
Great music that makes you want to turn up the volume loud.
Or life track like this.
Especially where human life is concerned. Surely, sooner or later, people will realize that lives actually matter.
Then you're in the right place. Keep it locked to World Jam Global, where music is harmony.
Music 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Yeah, you're a World Jam. Hotter than them.
See live schedule.
Got another top show coming up for you very shortly.
I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Stand by for another exclusive.
I already did my time. I paid for my crime.
We are now going live right across the world.
Did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. Back in the day, I didn't really care about the system. It was all about some.
Come on, it's time to share. Share this stream right across the world. Let's just make sure that we don't miss a trick.
I learned my lessons in the street. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about beating no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling
Okay.
you and you.
In just a very few short moments, I've got Jacqueline,
All kind of stupid shit.
Minifield Brown,
Sit back.
mother of Dre, Delondre, Minifield.
I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb. My brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump. But
Features today's show, Suicide or Murder.
I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Say a big shout going out to Gabriel, Tracy Lewis Denham,
Real alligator, especially all you haters.
Royce Eckley, and all you who are tuning in right across the globe. It's another edition of Issues Today live on World Jam Global Radio. You can catch us on www.worldjamglobalradio.com.
Did my time, paid for my crime.
Or you can join us on Facebook Live, on my personal page, on the World Jam Global Radio page, or Issues Today.
Did my time.
Please start sharing this amongst your friends and groups
Did my time.
as we get the truth out there today.
Pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime. Already did my time, I paid for my crime. Already did my time, I paid for my crime. I'm trying to get this felony off my back so I can get my life on track and have the right to vote and live like an ordinary citizen again. This is my message to all of my friends in the pen, statewide, worldwide. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life is so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story.
Now I just want to give you an advance notice.
I must have
Coming up on September the 8th,
stupid shit
we've got the Director of the United Nations,
over since I
along with guests such as Jerry Summers, Alex Salazar, Jonathan Newton, Greg Greer,
but I was nobody's child.
Yolanda McNear,
Had a lot in
Donna Hayes,
the real Terminator, much
sat round on a panel, and we are looking at what sanctions
like a
and
real
what powers we can bring to bear
haters
upon the government of the United States of America
for my crime.
for their treatment of people of color.
My time already did.
So all of these stories, all of these features that we've been doing up for the last 3 years or so
Things are going on right now
are leading to something, my friends.
in prison.
So put this date in your calendar, September the 8th, right here on World Jam Global Radio and Issues Today. We're going to have live the Director of the United Nations
Trying to cope with this living hell.
listening to the stories of the mothers and fathers and those that have fought on the battles of activism for police brutality, unlawful killing and wrongful convictions.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
So keep your shout outs coming.
This living hell.
And we are live every single Saturday, apart from when I'm on holiday,
Already did
right here at the same time
my crime.
on Issues Today of World Jam Global Radio.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses.
Very shortly, Jacqueline Minifield Brown will join us live to tell the story of her son, DeLondre Minifield, otherwise known as Dre. And we're talking about another life cut short in suspicious circumstances.
Amen.
Was it suicide or was it murder? That's going to be the choice that you're going to have to make after you've heard the evidence that we have, what you've not been allowed to hear, as we unravel this tragic story.
Pay for my crime. All those drive-by killings, stop them. It ain't about nothing. He who was out sin.
You got any comments? You got any questions that you might want to pose while Jackie's talking, or even while I'm talking?
My life on track and have the
Use the comments page on the Facebook Live, or join us on www.worldjamglobalradio.com. Get yourself into the chat room.
put down those knives. Stop stabbing each other.
And this track that you're hearing played now is by my dear friend, Mr. Ronnie Canada, who's just popped himself into the chat room. How we doing, Ronnie? Okay, but without any further ado, I just want to introduce you to today's guest, who is speaking on behalf of her son, Dre. His full name, Delondre Minifield, otherwise known to his friends as Dre. And his mother, who's been fighting this battle for the truth since his life was cut unceremoniously short. Jacqueline Minifield Brown. How are we, Jackie?
I'm doing well, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
The pleasure is all ours. It's an honor to be able to share this story, and it's an honor for you to choose us as a platform to tell this story out to the world. But first, just for those who don't know you or don't know where you're from, just let the audience know where you're from, who you are, and why you're here, Jackie.
I am currently living in Charlotte, North Carolina. However, I'm originally from Winchester, Virginia, which is where Delondre was killed at. I grew up there. We all grew up there. Small town.
Very small town.
Yes, very small.
And
Supposed to be a safe town.
And you are a mother as well.
Yes, I actually have 6 children.
Mm-hmm.
Delondre was my third. I have 2 boys and 4 girls.
Okay, so you Dre was one of the 2 boys.
Yes, he was my youngest son. I have an older son who's 13 months older than him.
And 4 girls.
Yes, that looked up to their big brother, and everybody that knew Delondre knew how much he loved his sisters. I mean, he was nothing he wouldn't do for his sisters.
Well, you're just slightly different to me. I have 6 as well, but mine's is the other way around. I have 2 girls and 4 boys.
Oh, okay.
So we just know what it's like to be a parent. You know what it's like to be a mother. I know what it's like to be a father.
Right.
And children are hard enough to manage without all the other complications that the world brings into the equation, right?
Yes.
But here's the thing: we're not really here to celebrate. We're here to unravel, get to the bottom of, expose what we believe to be a wrongdoing. And as you heard me say at the beginning of the show, on September the 8th, you actually have the Director of the United Nations live here on this show, along with a panel of approved speakers and activists from across the place, ex-chiefs of police and ministers and pastors and community leaders and public speakers and activists who are going to be speaking right here to put some of the cases forward for the mothers and the fathers of stolen lives and lost treasures. So we're here today. We're talking about another lost treasure, which is your son Dre, Delondre, and I want to just start talking about Dre as a child. I spoke to you just before we went live, and it's important. And most of my audience, my listeners, they know that I do this because I believe it's important for us to build a picture of who Dre was prior to the police gunning him down, so that we're not just left with the image that was put in the media, of a gun carrying, drug possessing thug who maybe deserved to get what he got. But I want to talk about the young man, the child that was your son that you brought into this world, and how you raised him. So tell us a little bit about Dre, and tell us about Dre as a baby, as a child growing up, please.
As he kind of came in with a bang. He was born actually on the day of the Million Man March, October 16th, 1995. As a baby, he was just adventurous. He was always smiling, just always on the go. When he turned, I want to say about 5, I have 3 older brothers, and they were all into football. So, he started playing football. By the age of 8, he was in Little League football. The coaches were so impressed. And, throughout his whole childhood, teenage years, he continued to play football. That was his passion. All the coaches wanted him. He was fast. He was good. All his teachers loved him. He had so many friends that, just everywhere he went, he just automatically got friends, and, people just followed him like, they would try to dress like him, and, just a lovable young man.
So amongst his peers, would you refer to him as a trendsetter? Was he sort of like somebody that had his own style and that other people liked?
Definitely. He was definitely he was a dresser. He liked to dress up. His hair, he just kept himself together. He was into sports, loved to be with friends, just a normal teenager, really.
Yeah, and what was he like with the ladies as he was getting into his teens?
Well, he was definitely popular with the ladies. You go through those teenage years where, you have a girlfriend, you're in love, and, it doesn't last. But, he did leave behind 2 children, one of which he never got to see born, a son. And he had actually talked to the mother about, when he found out that he was going to have a boy, he talked about that's one of the things that he was excited about, was teaching him to play football.
Wow. What was Dre like as a pupil, as a student in school? How was his relationship like with the teachers, for example?
All his teachers loved him. We actually, one day we had moved, and one of his elementary teachers came to our house and was like, "Oh, I was driving by and I seen DeLandre and I just missed him so much." I was like, she wanted to check on him, and this was when he was in his teenage years, and she still remembered him. He was never in trouble in school. I mean, he never got. I think he got suspended for chewing gum once, but he wasn't in fights. He wasn't. His grades were good. He loved to read. One year he asked for the Harry Potter series of books for Christmas. So, he was a good student. He was smart. Shortly before his death, he was actually trying to get into school to be a dental assistant.
Okay. And did he have any run-ins, any issues with local law enforcement or anything?
He did have a few run-ins when he was younger. When he was 14, he actually got into a fight because a white boy had called him a nigger. And I mean, kids fight, and DeLandre wasn't a big person, but I guess he was strong. And they actually ended up charging him as an adult in that fight when he was 14, which landed him with a felony. And as we know, it's hard to get anywhere with a felony. So it kind of took a lot of hope away from the future by him, just being charged with that.
Right. Did he have a continuous run-in with law enforcement, or was that just a little spat?
That was he actually was locked up for 18 months for that. So by the time he got out, he was around 16. He went back to school, but I think being treated as an adult, when he got locked up, I think it kind of took his childhood away, and everything was different when he got out, and he was kind of forced to be an adult. His childhood was just gone after that point, just because they wanted to charge him as an adult in that fight. And when people hear that you're a felon, they automatically think that you're just this bad person, and in actuality, all he was was a young boy who got into a fight with another young man.
And you know, unfortunately, those things do happen in life.
Yes.
You know, as a growing child, we have these fights, we have these falls, we make these mistakes,
Right.
we have these mess ups, and some of these things are meant to grow us, strengthen us, mature us even. But when you're severely punished for it first time, they do leave an indentation, they do leave a mark on your life. Some people recover from it well, some people never do. But when you've got the support and the network of a strong and loving family around you, you tend to come through it a lot easier than others do. But out there in America, I'm fully aware of what the felony charge does to an individual as far as going to work or moving forward with their life is concerned. But how did Dre respond when he was released from prison? Did he get stuck back into life, or what was his response to the way that he felt that he was handled as far as that particular charge and conviction was concerned?
Once he got out, he went back to school, but he eventually decided to get his GED. Then he went to trade school. He was training in Petersburg, Virginia, at a school there. And unfortunately, Petersburg, Virginia is not a good town as far as economically. You know, there's a lot of drugs, there's a lot of shootings and killings and things there. So eventually, you know, DeLondre did kind of meet those people again. And, you know, I feel like to be rehabilitated, I feel like you need to be away from those things, because we tend, you know, anybody tends to get sucked back into the same position if we're completely surrounded by it all the time. So he did get back around. I suppose
you've got to be involved in that kind of lifestyle to understand how it holds you and draws you in, right? Other people will just probably say, well, why didn't they just get away from it? But the pull is too strong, because as an ex convict myself, I'm fully aware of what it was like when you come out of jail and you just kind of feel like you don't fit in, and the first couple of things that you try don't work. And then you convince yourself it's because of what you've just gone through that it's not going to work. And at some point you're ready to give up and say, well, that must be your path forward from here on in. And sometimes it takes a really monumental, magical experience to take you away from these things, which don't often appear for most people. There's got to be a real strong resolve within in order for you to come out of that, a better person, so to speak. It's not easy. And then your peers, they kind of draw you back in because they miss you, for one. They kind of feel like they respect you a little bit more for what you did, and all of a sudden that starts to become your identity. That starts to become what people see you as, and it's very difficult, as you've just said, if you don't move away, to be able to stay away from that impression and image that people are beginning to form from you, because now you're out of jail now. It's almost like whatever you were before don't matter. Now you're this guy. You're the guy that's just been to jail. And that makes you a bigger or badder dude than others, so to speak. And I have sons myself who have all fallen in to that kind of life circle. So I fully understand how difficult it is as a parent to really keep saying to your child, well, better will come, son. Better will come, son. You just keep on trying, son. The good things will happen, son. When every time your son tries to do something positive, this conviction or the felony slaps him in the face like a wet fish. Can't go and get a job and can't go and do this. And his heart's desire has now got to be minimized to something else. So I understand that. So Dre got the conviction. He got sentenced. He did 18 months. Then he came back, and unfortunately, he was drawn into the community peer circle, right?
Right. I mean, he wasn't like into gang activity or anything, but he just hung around. I mean, he just met the wrong people. Just my opinion. There wasn't too much good in that town, and I just regret, even moving to that town. But Delondre would come to me often and talk to me. He wanted to do better, and he just, even when he was down, he always made everybody else smile. Every time we passed a homeless person, even if he had like $3, he would give them one. Because he was just that type of person. I watched him give his shoes off of his feet, to somebody who needed shoes. That's just the type of person he was. And, I talked to him and he was like, he called me Jackie, but he was like, he's like, I'm 17 or 18 and I'm already labeled a violent felon. He got a job. You can't get a good job here with a violent felony. Like, they just will not hire you. And it takes a lot of hope away from these young black boys. And people don't realize that it leaves them with no hope, and then they turn to the street.
That no hope is a real killer, right?
Right.
It's a killer of kids' dreams. It's a killer of aspirations. It's a real tragic place for a young person to find themselves when they are still in their prime and at the peak of their lives. When every possibility, opportunity, and potential is supposed to be laying down before them, to have that taken away, stripped, even for what could be considered a mistake. Because some people would say, well, why didn't he just walk away from the guy that called him the N-word? Well, it's easy for those to say. And I was having a conversation with a gentleman this morning, a dear friend of mine's, and he was pointing out that every time we talked about the black thing, I reverted to the we and you and us and them scenario. And I said, well, yeah, it is, because until you've actually had to go through what we've gone through as people of color, you actually don't understand why we're that angry. And I suppose some people just don't understand why a young man who's living in a modern world where things are supposed to be different and equal would still be angry when somebody intentionally calls them a name with the purpose of offending and insulting them. Now, that's just the same as somebody just coming up and punching you in your jaw. In my opinion, and when you're raised in the ghetto, when you're brought up on the streets, there's just a line that you just don't cross without expecting there to be a consequence. And as parents, we teach our children, don't we, that for your actions there are consequences. And when our children don't see consequences, then they can start to argue, even with the parents' nurturing of right and wrong. So there has to be consequences. And when they don't see no consequences, then they sometimes take it into their own hands. And that's understandable. I'm not trying to justify it. I'm just explaining it. From somebody who was... I did a terrible thing once to somebody that decided to call me a black something or the other. And I actually pulled their arm inside of my car, did up the electric window, and drove down the road, dragging them down the street behind me before I undid the window and let them roll around in the street in agony. So, I was a street boy. That's what I did. That's how I lived back then too. No different to Dre and some of the other guys that live across your side of the water. But that's how I lived a very similar life over here in the UK. I come from that lifestyle. And I'm also one of the first born generation West Indians here in England. So I witnessed the racist outburst, the launch and the first movement of the Black Power movement and the skinheads and the teddy boys and their response to black people trying to get some form of work and equality here in this country. So I'm fully aware of how people can be when they think that they've got something over you. So I'm not trying to justify Dre's response. I'm just trying to explain how he could have been feeling and why he would have probably felt the need to respond or retaliate when somebody is using that word with the intentional purpose of insulting, embarrassing, and humiliating him. Yeah?
Right.
So,
Yes.
so when that's not treated with the same fairness and equality of the person that's the perpetrator of that, then that can leave somebody with a very bitter and resentful taste in their mouth. So they go to jail, they spend some time, and people ask them what they're in jail for, and yeah, I was fighting, and they ask you what you were fighting for, and then when you tell them, bearing in mind that, you know, the population in prison, black people far outnumber white people anyway, right? So he's going to get a lot of encouragement and support for him standing up to that, right? He's going to be respected and lifted up, in fact, for standing up to that. So even that gives him almost a false sense of belonging, right? Do you see where I'm coming from with that? Hi, can you hear me, Jackie?
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. It's a poor network, but we're getting there.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just saying that it's we can understand why Dre would be swayed by the outpouring of support that he would have got from fellow inmates in the prison, where black people far outnumber white people anyway, for his stance against somebody who's been predominantly racist, right?
Right.
And then he comes out into the community, and his peers would be like, "Woo, woo, 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 go, Dre." You know what I mean?
Right.
That's the reaction that he would have got when he came out of prison, because he stood up for something that they believed was something worth standing up for. It wasn't like he was robbing an old lady or, you know. So
right.
And that's where the lines begin to get blemished, right? Of right and wrong, and an understanding of right and wrong. And the police's idea of right and wrong appears to be different to our idea of right and wrong. And I don't want to talk too much, because this is meant to be about you talking. But I so sympathize with parents who are put in this predicament, because my mother was a real law-abiding, respectful individual, 80 years old, probably very much like your mother, Jackie. The law was the law, and, you know, police were always right. And if the police arrest you or they gave you a slap, you must have done something wrong. That was my mother's belief, right? And I'm sure that would have been your mother's belief when she was trying to bring you guys up, was that you respect the law, you respect your elders, and you do what's right, you know? And that's what my mother did. Until one day, my mother was arrested in her see-through negligee, because I had committed a crime that my mother knew nothing of. And I went on the run, and I managed to escape the chasing police. I managed to get into the house without anybody knowing that I was there. And we had a little airing cupboard at the top of the stairs that I went and hid inside of. And nobody in my house knew I'd come in. And somebody on the estate pointed the police to my house, and they arrived at my doorstep, and my mother and father come to the door, and they're asking, the police are asking them for me, and they're saying I'm not there, and the police are saying, well, yes, he is, we've been told that he's there. And my mum and dad are saying, well, he's not here, we haven't seen him. And then there's a whole thing going on the doorstep where my dad gets involved, and there's a lot of words, and it sounds like there's some pushing and shoving. I could hear this from my hiding spot. So I come out, and I give myself up to the police to stop my mum and dad getting in trouble. And at that point, they arrest my mother for obstructing a police officer in the execution of his duty, claiming that she must have known that I was there all the time. Then they take her to the police station, they charge her and take her to court, and she gets fined and found guilty with a lie, the police told. And the point I'm trying to make is that was the first day, the first time in my mother's entire life she really acknowledged, accepted and believed that the police tell lies. Now, as a youth growing up in my community, I would often tell my mother of stories of how the police would come about and pick us up and beat us up and chuck us out to the van down in the next corner. And my mother never believed us. She always said, well, you must have done something wrong. She never believed us until that day. So, you know, as a mother, you do your best to try and teach your children the right thing, how to do things the right way. And your son was probably trying to do things the right way until the moment of that particular interaction with this individual that was deliberately trying to provoke him into something or whatever it was, or just insulting because he felt that he could. And that was to change your son's outlook and life forever.
Forever. Yeah. And it's amazing that you would tell that story, because we actually had almost the exact same situation. Me and DeLandre, they actually, when they arrested him, they had him in handcuffs, and he was trying to turn around to tell me something, and the cop like jerked him, and DeLandre automatically jerked back, and the cop slammed him, and he hit his head on.
Hi, Jackie. Are we losing you? Hello, Jackie.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
I'm hearing you now. We lost you for about a minute, if not that. It was on about when he jerked him, and he jerked him back, and then he slammed Dre. That's where we got to.
Yeah. Okay. He slammed DeLandre, and this was DeLandre was a little boy. At that time he was sick. They thought he had Crohn's disease, but he didn't. It was some intestinal thing. But he was actually down to at the time he was down to 87 or 89 pounds. So, me as a mother, this cop slams DeLandre. So I'm trying to get DeLandre to look at me, and I'm on the cop's back trying to get him to get off of DeLandre, because I seen him hit his head on the metal door, and I got arrested and I got charged with obstructing a police officer. And actually, until this day, I've been denied jobs for that charge. Wow. So, it's just amazing that, you would tell that story, because we had the same exact situation.
And that is it, because most old school police officers would testify to the stern, assertive upbringing of Afro-Caribbeans or, Black Americans and etc. And how that discipline of respect was instilled and put into them from a young age. But Dre comes out of jail. He's now being uplifted by his peers in the community because he stood up against a racist, a thug. He got convicted and went to jail for it, served time for it. So he almost comes out a hero, right?
Somewhat, I guess in street terms he would be.
Yeah.
But just the sentencing that, I didn't even, at the time, I didn't even realize how bad it was, but his brother was with him at the time, and another boy. They actually tried to give them 10 years for that.
Wow.
And my oldest son, he is 23 now, and he is still on probation for that act.
Wow. Okay, well, as parents, we don't endorse or encourage any violence. We don't teach our children to respond violently. But again, I will reiterate, I'm not going through this because I'm trying to justify what Dre did. I'm just trying to explain what he went through and why his mindset would have been different. So now he's at this place where he's now back in the community, and the guys are exalting him, lifting him up, and patting him on the back for standing firm and being assertive and being the guy that did that. How was his development, or shall I say his display between the family home and the streets? Did he start to run the streets more?
Yeah, he stayed out a lot, but I wouldn't say he was always in the streets. I actually used to work night shift, and he would actually stay up all night until he made sure that I got home safe. He would stay there with his sisters while I was at work, and so he was home at night. Until I took him back
did you
up.
see any changes in his behavior or his attitude? Did he start to do things differently?
He started to, in hindsight, he he started to lose hope of getting out, I think.
Yeah.
I think he just wanted, like, several times he came to me. I have a brother that lives in Colorado that's a personal trainer, and he asked me to ask him, could he come and live with him, because he just wanted to get away from all that. He wanted better. He wanted to do better. He wanted better for his family. But he just did not know how to do it. And black men in the street are expected to be hard. I mean, if you act soft in the street, you get taken advantage of.
I mean, you can't come from jail and act soft, can you?
Right.
Because there's an expectation in the community of what you should be like, and something that some people think that you need to live up to. Did he start to have little run-ins with local law enforcement once he came out of prison?
Once he came out, he really didn't have any run-ins with law enforcement. He got locked up shortly after that for violating his probation just because he didn't have a job. But that was it. I mean, he didn't get any other charges after that. They were saying that after he died, they were saying they had warrants in Petersburg for robbing somebody. I'm aware of the incident that happened, but I don't think that there was a warrant issued for his arrest for that.
Okay, so I'm just trying to get to a point where we can make it absolutely clear that up until that point and thereafter, Dre Londre Minifield was not a thug, was not a wanted felon, didn't have a history of criminal activity, wasn't wanted by the police, wasn't having regular run-ins with them, being pulled into the back of their cars or locked up in local jails for weekends. It was a one-off incident that was provoked by somebody's deliberate intention and purpose to insult, offend, and humiliate him. And his reaction to that is what brought about his circumstance, which was to begin to change his life forevermore, right?
Absolutely.
And even in the midst of all of this, Dre was still mama's boy.
He was. And he used to get so mad at me because, like I said, black men want to appear hard in the street. It's just expected of them, I think. And I would tell him, I would say, DeLondre, I know your heart. He was sensitive. He had a good heart. He wanted to help everybody, even when he couldn't help himself. Even if he didn't have something, he wanted to make sure everybody else had. And he would get so mad at me because, he just wanted to appear that he didn't care about anything, he didn't have feelings. But, he always talked to me about, and I know that, he always talked to me about wanting more, wanting better. Shortly, the last time I seen him, he actually brought us all into the kitchen. It was right before Christmas, and he brought us all together, me and his sisters and brother, and with tears in his eyes, this boy says to me, "What can I do to make us better as a family?" And, to me, that's not somebody who is out here to hurt anybody else. They just want to live their life. They just want to make things better for their family, for people around them.
So that's Dre, DeLondre Minifield, young boy, child, son, brother, friend to many. And I believe, if I'm right, it was 2016, right? February the 28th.
Yes, sir.
So we're kind of 2.5 years or so, 2.5 years or so since he passed, since he was killed. His life was cut short. And I want us to now just, if you can, Jackie, if you can take us back to that day, to what you know. Now, bearing in mind some of the information that I have might be conflicting and different, but what I do know is apparently a fight had broken out between some people, but Dre was not involved in that fight. But if you can take us back to that beginning and try and talk us through that, give us a picture, an idea of what was going on that day before Dre got involved, then we can get a better understanding as you start to delve into the story.
Okay. If you remember, I told you we were living in Petersburg, and I told you it's bad in Petersburg.
Yeah.
So I actually was worried about him because so many young black men were getting shot in Petersburg. I took him back to our hometown in Winchester, Virginia, which my brother actually used to be a police officer on that police force. I took him back up there because I thought he would be safe there. But on February, and this was just shortly before he was killed, maybe 2 weeks or so, because I was just so worried that something was going to happen to him. I used to text him every day. He would be like, "Mom, I'm okay." He was like, "It's not that serious." I used to text him every day because I was so worried about him. But on February 28th, apparently a fight broke out between some people. My son was never at the fight. He never made it to the fight. Nobody seen him at the fight. But the police were responding to a fight. They had a description and knew who they were looking for. They got a description for a light-skinned male with a jean jacket on. My son is dark-skinned, and he had on black. So while police officers are responding to this fight, my son and his friend are walking down the street, and they stop them. And DeLondre runs because that's what you do nowadays in America when police stop and pull out a gun, because we are littered with the streets of murdered children who didn't run. Right. So don't be afraid to say it. Tell it like it is. I mean, I try to see both sides, but it's just so clear that, as soon as you see a black male, we're, even a black person, we're looked at as criminal before we even do anything. Yeah. So automatically, they're thinking he did something. So
even when we don't match the description.
Right. And they weren't at the fight. Like, they weren't even at the location where the fight was at. So my son runs, and it's unclear with the evidence that we have what happened. They're saying within 7 seconds from the time they stopped them to the time that shots were fired, 7 seconds that he ran. I think I sent you a image. Yeah. That he ran a far distance, climbed 2 fences, and shot himself within 7 seconds of that initial encounter.
I mean, I want you to think about the question I'm going to ask you in a minute, right? Because it's the most absurd in everything that I've read, in everything that I've seen, it's the most absurd conclusion that the law enforcement could have come to when you think about where the fatal wound was that killed him. So
right.
The question that I'll be asking you after I read what I'm about to read is, what would have been going on for DeLondre, right, that anybody would consider that he would intentionally kill himself? All right, I want you to think about that for a minute, and I'm going to read. I'm going to read an excerpt from a piece that I found on the internet from a friend of his, Aaliyah Green, who says another friend from the fight came back and got him, and then they went walking down the street, and the police told him to stop. Well, he didn't stop. He kept running, says the friend of DeLondre Minifield, Aaliyah Green. And this is what Aaliyah says happened next. Another police car pulled up, and 3 police jumped out the car, and 2 pulled a gun. 1 pulled a taser, and he was running. And as he jumped, and I imagine when she says, and he was running, I'm assuming that she was saying that Dre was running. And as he jumped over the fence, as he jumped over the first fence, they shot the taser. And when he jumped over the second fence, you hear a gunshot. Now, you see, this girl is not trying to manipulate or manufacture evidence. She's telling it as she remembers it. She says, and I want to say this again, as he jumped over the first fence, right, they shot the taser. So she saw them shoot the taser. And when he jumped over the second fence, you hear, she doesn't say that he shot. She says, you hear a gunshot, and we all see him, and all we see is him like laid over the fence. And then a whole bunch of police officers run and like pull him off the fence and then slam him on the ground and start doing CPR. Right?
Yes.
And then she goes on to say, it's not just right. They are basically taking everything that we saw and just putting it in the trash. And that's because the Virginia State Police, in conjunction with the medical examiner's officers, say they continue to investigate the case as a suicide, and that an investigation shows that no officers fired their weapons during the incident. Right? But we all know that police officers carry a secondary weapon, and maybe it might not have been their registered weapon or whatever it is, their service weapon. But it's quite clear that while Dre was running, first he was tasered, and then he was shot. But the fact that he was shot, if I'm correct, and the autopsy is correct, in the back of the head?
Yes.
The fatal wound was in the back of the head, which is a very inconsistent and conflicting statistic for somebody attempting suicide with a firearm. In fact, I'm not sure if I know of a report of somebody shooting themselves in the back of the head. But what was their reason for believing or suggesting that Dre deliberately took his own life?
I don't think that they had any basis for believing that he was suicidal. Before I got up there, we called the police all that day, to find out what happened. They never called us back. So all we had was what they were putting on Facebook, what his friends were saying. And, all his friends were saying that, he was slumped on the fence and they pulled him off. The police released a story to the newspaper before they even contacted the family that he ran and that they found him, not that they tasered him, not that they chased him, that they found him and he had already shot himself. That was the first story that we got. Then once we started protesting in the streets, we got a second story. And then we met with them again and we got a third story. So none of those stories match.
So the police claim that he shot himself and that they're treating it as a suicide. So have they explained what they were doing there in the first place? Because I'm only saying that because either they were in response to a reported fight that was taking place and turned up to deal with that issue, or they turned up to deal with what was inevitably a potential suicide. So which was it?
Right. I don't even know where the suicide theory came from. I think it was just, I mean, and from the evidence that we've gotten since that time, um, we've found that even the officers that were there, their stories don't match.
So
The officer that tased him, she was an animal control officer. She had a taser in one hand and a gun in the other hand. Another officer was behind him with his gun drawn, supposedly from their story. There were 9 officers supposedly in close proximity to his body when he was shot. 9. They took 2 weapons to test him. They didn't do gunshot residue because they said, that because they were close to him, that it wouldn't come out conclusive. There were no, and plus they said that the gun that he supposedly shot himself with, they didn't see it until they rolled his body over. So I don't know how that happens either.
So how do you shoot yourself in the back of the head and the gun end up underneath your body when you drop?
Exactly.
Did anybody ask the question?
We've asked that question many times. Many times. We even, the bullet, they didn't find the bullet. They supposedly, the Virginia State Police did their investigation. 2 days later, well, I guess the day after, they realized that the bullet wasn't in his head. My family, we spent a lot of time at the site, just trying to figure out what went wrong. And my daughter was sitting at the fence, literally in the spot where his head was. And just, she looks across the fence, and on top of the leaves, she sees the bullet. We found the bullet. And if they were actually looking for that bullet, they would have found that bullet. We found the bullet to the gun, and it was on the other side of the fence. They're saying he shot himself from right to left, which would have put the bullet on the left side of his body, but the bullet was on the right side of his body. So there's a lot of answers we don't have, and we want to know what happened, because none of the evidence coincides with what they're telling us happened.
Police had responded to a report of a fight. Upon arrival, Minifield stopped and fired a gun as officers approached. Did you hear that report?
No, I've never heard that one.
So
I've never heard that one. That is definitely a new one.
That's on the Mail Online, and that was reported on the first published on the 3rd of March 2016. Right? It was written by somebody called Thomas Burrows. It says, protesters have erupted on the streets of Winchester as they dispute claims a black man fatally shot himself while pursued by police officers. DeLondre Minifield, a 20-year-old with ties to the Richmond and Winchester areas, died on Sunday, February the 28th. Police had responded to a report of a fight. Upon arrival, Minifield stopped and fired a gun as officers approached. According to the police statement, he died from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound and no officers opened fire. However, that version of events has been disputed by many in the Winchester community, with some witnesses claiming to have seen police aim and open fire. So you've never heard that report?
I've never heard that report. Never.
Which Winchester police spokesman Sergeant Frank Myrtle said no officers are on administrative leave over the incident. He said several officers were involved in a foot pursuit, but he did not know how many. Spokesman Sergeant Frederick Tyler said he did not have details about the races of the officers involved. Okay, so
all the officers were white. All the officers were white because there's maybe only 2 or 3 black officers on the entire police force in Winchester.
Yes, I get you. I mean, I'm just looking at pictures and seeing if there's anything else here. Kayla Friesen, 24, of Winchester, said she was in the car with Pennell and Minifield, was about to climb a fence when police opened fire. So you actually have a woman by the name of Kayla Friesen. I don't know. Have you seen her statement?
Yes, we actually we've spoken with Quay Pennell, and we actually the lawyers have gotten their statements and everything for the lawsuit. So they are aware of their statements, and they've talked. Our investigators and lawyers have talked to them.
So there are witnesses who have actually nothing to do with your family, nothing to do with Dre,
Right.
who are driving by
No.
and have claimed to have watched the officers open fire or draw their weapons and pointed in the direction of this man who they didn't know his name that was climbing over a fence or jumping over a
Right.
fence, which all fits in with Aaliyah Green's statement and observations.
Yes.
Okay. So what was your response to the law enforcement or the sergeant or the head of the investigation claiming that they were dealing with a suicide, self-inflicted gunshot wound?
I didn't understand where it came from that he would have shot himself. And then, by the time I got up there the next morning, they had already done an autopsy, moved his body. And when I found out where he was shot at, I was like, there's no way that he was laying on his stomach. They're saying he was laying on his stomach and reached behind his head and shot himself dead. He died on his stomach. So I didn't understand where the theory came from. Only thing I could think was that they just didn't want to be accountable for shooting him, because I can't see the possibility of that happening. I never seen it in his character to give up on anything, and especially not life. He had just had a daughter. I never seen any signs that he would do that. So I didn't understand where the suicide theory came from. And then once I found out that where the gunshot wound was, I was like, there's no way. And they wouldn't give us any answers, so, and, I want to congratulate his friends, Aaliyah Green, especially, she organized the protest, because the police wouldn't talk to us until we protested in the streets for 2 days. Like, they literally would not give us any information. My sister dealt with the police a lot, because I actually had a breakdown. It was a lot, marching in the streets, and you don't know what happened. You don't understand why your child is dead. The police won't talk to you. It's just surreal. And you're trying to bury your child at the same time. And it's like, people don't realize that this is not just these young men getting killed. This is destroying families. Like, our family will never be the same. His little sisters, they don't have their big brother anymore. Life has just changed. And every time one of these boys is killed, it changes so many people's lives, and somebody needs to be held accountable for it. And that's why I've tried to get involved in activism and things like that, because, once you feel that pain, you never want anybody else to feel that pain, because it never goes away. And when you have no answers, it just, day and night, you don't know what happened to your child. And, that's part of you that you'll never get back.
I mean, you spoke to a lot of people in those days just after his death, right? I've seen many news articles, stories. You spoke to many of those friends that were with him or around him at that time, and managed to get a vague picture of what had taken place, right?
Yes.
It says in the Winchester Star, It reported that the Virginia State Police filed a search warrant on Wednesday in the Circuit Court in Frederick County, and that warrant indicated that officers found drugs on Minifield's body and nearby a loaded revolver with one spent shell casing.
Yes, that's what they told us.
Did they ever confirm what drugs it was that they found on him?
I think they found marijuana. I know in his property, I know there was marijuana, and then they said that there was something in a foil packet that they didn't know what it was. And I'm like, this is the Virginia State Police that told us this, that they didn't know. I asked them what it was, and they didn't know what it was. That's what they told us. But I don't know. I mean, there's still evidence that they won't turn over to us. They have a protective order over some of the evidence that, they will not turn over to us, even though we've been in a lawsuit now for 2 years.
Did they ever indicate as to what quantity of drugs they found on Dre?
I think there was a couple baggies. I mean, the little tiny Ziplocs of marijuana, and then the foil packets. And I think there were some pills. I think it was high blood pressure medicine or something like that.
Okay. So the high blood pressure medicine and stuff like that, we can just put to one side. My point being is that the police like to. That's why I found it so important. I feel it's so important when I ask you at the beginning of the show to tell us a bit about your son. Because no, we're not trying to say that he was an angel. And yes, he made mistakes. But this image that they're trying to leave the general public with, those that don't know you, those that don't know him, those that don't know your family and the community, this image that they're trying to leave people with is the one that will, make it easier for them to be able to sweep this under the carpet and make it go unnoticed. So it's important that we talk about Dre, the individual, as you guys knew him, so that we can tell the world that the Dre that they're reading about is not the Dre you know. So for me, when they don't identify, when they don't quantify, when they don't qualify what drugs and the amount of drugs, it's to leave an impression on the reader that he may well have had bags of drugs. He may well have been a dealer, and the fact that there was a loaded revolver which was found nearby with one spent shell casing, right? That he's a gun-carrying drug dealer. That's the impression that they're trying to give. But that's far from the truth, right?
Absolutely. And, if in his property, my sister got his clothes and his shoes. And, if they wanted to paint this picture that, they tried to say he had heroin and this other stuff. They tried to make it seem like, he was a big drug dealer with a gun and all this. And, what they took from his pockets was $7. So if they want the public to believe that, he was out here selling all these drugs, then, that's just not true. You don't have $7 and 2 packs of cigarettes, laying next to your dead body if you're this great big drug dealer.
And that's where it really becomes interesting, because when you start to lay down the facts alongside the speculation, then it starts to paint a totally different picture, and you begin to see that the breakage, the cracks in their evidence or their theory. So, do we know what happened to those that were involved in the fight?
I actually asked them that. I actually asked them, did anybody get arrested at the fight? Apparently, once they started chasing DeLandre, they forgot all about the fight. But I'd like to mention that the fight that broke out had nothing to do with DeLandre. He wasn't near the fight. He wasn't seen at the fight. He wasn't seen with a gun. He wasn't, the fight is always brought into it, but the truth is, the only significance that that fight holds in DeLandre's death is that the police were supposed to be responding to a fight where a young man had a gun, and it was not DeLandre. And one of the neighbors at that fight was a police officer. And in our evidence that we've gotten, she says that she didn't have her service weapon, you know, but she's the one that called the fight in. And she said that a young man had a gun at the fight, but another lady called in and said that there was a fight, but there were no guns. So, you know, I don't know how my son ended up dead because of, you know, some other young men fighting, but nobody was ever arrested or anything that I know of for that fight.
So the police turn up to respond to a fight where an individual was supposedly in possession of a live firearm. They're given a description of what this individual looks like and what this individual is wearing. Am I correct so far?
Yes, and I'm told that they actually knew this boy by name because he had been in so much trouble. I was told that they actually mentioned his name in the audio.
So they actually knew who they were looking for.
Yes.
Right. And upon their arrival, they happen upon your son. Now, was your son walking with Aaliyah Green at the time?
No, he wasn't walking with Aaliyah Green. I think she just lives nearby.
Okay. So they happen upon your son. They jump out of their vehicle and point their guns at him. And in a panic, he runs.
Yes.
Okay. Because, as we've already pointed out previously, that's what you do if you're a young black man in the United States of America and you are innocently approached by a police officer with his gun out. You run. Because if you don't run, you end up dead anyway.
Right.
So he runs. They taser him. And then Aaliyah says she hears a shot. They dismiss the hearing of that shot. Well, they don't actually, because him shooting himself in the back of his head would have been a shot. But they're claiming that he lands on the ground, on his belly, and then shoots himself in the back of the head.
That was one of the final stories. But the first story that we got was that he jumped over a fence and then he was in the parking lot and he slipped on a pile of snow, rolled down a hill, and shot himself. That was one of the stories that they gave us. Actually, that was the second story. The first one was that they were just chasing him and they lost sight of him, and then they found him again and he had already shot himself. So, you know, when you hear that and the story changes 3 times, I mean, the whole route that he went changed according to the police. You know, so if it's a suicide, why is the story changing? You know, I mean, I simply want to know the truth about what happened to DeLandre. And you know, no matter how hard it is for me or, you know, any of these mothers that are out here fighting, you know, we don't care how hard it is, how many tears we have to shed. You know, we do this because, you know, we've lost part of us and we want to know the truth and we want somebody to be accountable, you know, for taking these young lives. I mean, it's affecting, you know, so many. I mean, I think kids are becoming, you know, just insensitive to death. Like, it's just, you know, oh, another one's on, you know, it's like, it's just, you know, really sad. And I mean, you know, that's why I try to push forward so that, you know, nobody needs to go through this. And people need to be held accountable and tell the truth.
In your lifetime, when you first started giving birth to your children, did you ever think in a million years that this would be the outcome for one of your children?
You know, I go through that all the time. I think about the days when I watched the TV and, you know, Tamir Rice and, you know, all the other ones. And I see the parents on TV and I'm like, oh my God, that must be awful. And you can just only imagine how awful it is. Nobody ever thinks it's going to happen to them. Winchester's a small town. It's, you know, laid back. It's not a big population. It's not a big city. It's near West Virginia. Never in a million years would I have thought that my son, or actually even that anything like that would happen in that town. But you know, that's what I try to tell people. You know, people tell me, why do you focus on this so much? Why don't you get over it? Why don't you move past it? It's not going to bring him back. And I tell them it's gonna, you know, because people don't realize things until they actually feel the effect of it. You know, we can watch it on TV every single day, but until we feel that pain that hits us and changes our life forever, you know, people tend to not get involved. They want to ignore it. They want to pretend it's not going to happen to them. They want to pretend like everything's okay, that this just, you know, our children are safe. They're not. They're not safe. I mean, and I just hate seeing every single time that one of these black boys is killed, nobody's held accountable. And everybody sees it. And I mean, the laws have to change. I know there's a lot that has to change, but I mean, it's just, I don't even know what else to say about it. It's just, you know, tragic, not just for my son, but, you know, so many mothers that have had to do this. It's excruciating, it's exhausting, and we still have no justice.
Let me take you back a bit. So, how did you hear that it was your son, or that your son had been killed, or your son had been shot, or your son had been involved in some incident involving the law enforcement?
I will never forget that call. It was shortly after 4:30, maybe 5 o'clock. His girlfriend called me, and I guess I missed her call, and she called me right back, or she texted me and she was like, call me as soon as possible, 911, whatever. So I kept trying to call her and I get on the phone with her and she's just screaming. And, you know, when you go through things like this, it's almost like a dream. But, you know, all I hear is her screaming, and she's like, the police just shot Londre in the back of the head. I'm sorry, Jackie. I'm sorry. And apparently she was near a police officer, and I tried to get her to let me talk to one of the officers, but of course he wouldn't talk to me. So at that time, that's all I knew. She didn't know what happened. Her friends told her that the police were chasing him. They shot him in the back of the head. That's all she knew at that time too. Then everything started getting on Facebook. You know, that's when we found out that, you know, what Aaliyah was saying, that they were chasing him, that he was over the fence. And, you know, so we're steadily calling the police up there, trying to figure out, is this Delondre? Is it, you know, because I refused to believe that it was actually him. I was waiting for somebody to call me and tell me it really was not him, because the police wouldn't call us back. You know, the first information I got from the police was in the newspaper the next day, was their story. They never spoke to me until 2 days after he died. I think my sister went to the Virginia State Police Office the next day, and they actually confirmed to her that it was him, but they would not call us back at all.
So hold on a minute. On the day of the incident, you called the local law enforcement who did not or refused to confirm that your son had been involved in that particular incident.
We called repeatedly. all we called, I think, until 1 o'clock that morning. We found out at 4:30, 5 o'clock, and we called until like 1 o'clock that night. Um, and no, nobody would call us back. Nobody would confirm anything or anything.
Have they ever given you a reason as to why they refused to respond to your request for the information as to whether or not it was your son?
They never said why they wouldn't initially talk to us within the first 2 days. But the only reason that they've given us for the lack of communication is that it was under investigation. That was the only answer that we ever got.
I don't know, but I'm just lost for words as to, irrespective of how they wanted to explain what had happened and how it would happen, why they wouldn't confirm that you'd lost your son and allowed you as a mother, as a parent, to start your grieving process.
Right. The first time I seen my son, I think was after the second day of the protest. They actually brought his body back to the funeral home, and we didn't get to identify his body. They identified his body through his Facebook page. That's how they identified his body. And the Virginia State Police confirmed that they used Facebook to identify my son's dead body instead of calling his family or his parents. And, a majority of my family lives up there where he was killed, and, my brother used to work for that police department. So, that the Minifield name is kind of known in that area. So they would have known how to get in touch with that family. But the first time I seen him was after they had finished the autopsy. And they had just brought him back from the medical examiner's office, and he was in the body bag. And, it's just surreal to not know. You just see your child dead in a body bag, and you have no answers. You have no reason why they're dead. You don't know why they're dead. You don't know what happened, and nobody's giving you answers. And my issue is, if he committed suicide, why all the secrecy? Why all the protective orders over the evidence? Why the search warrants? That doesn't follow a suicide investigation.
No, because at that point, if you were dealing with what you thought to be a suicide, you'd be trying to speak to the family to find out what his state of mind was, what was he going through, what was troubling him, what was on his mind, why would he be doing this, why would he put himself in this position. You'd be trying to put that all out so you could genuinely put this thing to bed, right?
Right.
So the fact that they didn't take your calls, didn't return your calls, didn't confirm that it was your son, referred to it as an investigation, although they continue to say that they were investigating a suicide, self-inflicted gunshot.
Yes.
But they punished you as a parent. And my audience that are listening in particular, I just want to get your feedback on this, because you've got a woman, a mother, who is worried because she's received a phone call that has said that her son has been shot by law enforcement officers. She's trying to find out if this is true, and she's not getting any answers. And more importantly, her son's not yet come home. So you're left, A, worrying yourself to death at home, and B, not getting any response from the one organization that could put that to bed, put it to rest, and give you the truth.
Right.
Don't that just smack you? Go on.
We got no answers, and that was what brought about the outrage, or I don't want to say outrage, but it's just, we didn't understand if they were saying if it happened how it did, why won't you talk to us? Why won't you give us the evidence? Why didn't you call us? You know, they could, why for 2 days did you not speak to the family and tell us what happened? Why are you releasing news? They released 20 press releases, and each one of them was different. Their stories changed. And my thing is, a suicide is a suicide. Why did the story change? The Virginia State Police said after the initial first day that they talked to the witnesses, they didn't talk to the witnesses anymore. But the story still changed 3 more times. So how did the story change if you didn't talk to anybody else?
Wow. I guess that you're just left with more questions than answers. And we've moved 2.5 years on from the incident. How much information have they released since?
We have a good deal of the police reports. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff that the Virginia State Police will not release to us. Supposedly he was tased. He was tased 2 times. Like I've seen the crime scene photos, and it looks like the taser is actually attached to his hair near the gunshot wound. And if you remember, I mentioned the animal control officer actually had a taser in one hand and a gun in the other hand. The 2 officers that were there, one of them says she doesn't know whether she released the taser before the gunshot or after the gunshot. She says she doesn't know. So, if their stories don't even match, what can I really believe? But we have, over 1,000 pages of, statements from witnesses and people that were near. We have about the fight that had, that nobody ever seen him at the fight. And, at the end of the day, I'm just still sitting here wondering why my son is dead because somebody else was fighting somewhere, and I still have no answers.
Since your son was shot dead, you talk about the first 2 days of protests, people being out on the streets. What was that like?
It was touching. I was actually, I don't even know how to describe how I felt because I was feeling so many things, but all I could do was keep looking up and say, DeLondre, this is for you. Like, I've never seen anything like that in the town of Winchester. I mean, there was an outpouring of people I've never seen before. You're always going to have, they talk about violent protesters and, you're always going to have your young folks that take it a little step further. But as far as the family, we were out there because we wanted answers. It's not about F the police or anything like that, but, why won't the police talk to us? That's the issue. That's why F the police comes in, because it's like, and one of the most, I don't even know how to describe, one of the officers, a Virginia State Police officer, looked at me in my face and I said, "Can you tell me why my son's dead?" And he smirked at me and laughed and walked away. My sister had to pull me back. I mean, I couldn't, just, and this was probably on the first day of the protest. And, it's like, when you see somebody laugh and your child's laying dead and you don't know why, it gives you a kind of feeling, for the police, so, I just don't understand any of it. The secrecy, there's none of the, police have tried to cooperate with us or anything like that. Like I said, it's been 2.5 years and, we're still fighting. We're still trying to, I'm still trying to get his cell phones back so I can, I never even got to see him hold his daughter. His daughter was, I think, 4 months old. I had not even met her. He was supposed to bring her to see me that Sunday that he died for the first time. So the first time I seen my granddaughter was the day after my son died.
And
And,
I'm sure you said to me earlier on that he never got to meet her. Did you say
I'm sorry,
that?
what was your question?
I said I'm sure you said to me earlier on that he actually never got to meet her, his last child.
Yeah, he had a son born in that following May. Yeah, he never got to see his son born. And it just, it makes me sad that, there's two children that will never know, who their father was. And I don't want, for them to get older and look in the paper or something and think that their dad was this violent felon or this bad person that sold drugs and did this. I want him to be remembered as, a loving person, somebody who would do anything for his family. I mean, I don't, people think their kids are angels or whatever. Kids are what they are. But one thing I can say for certain is I know 100% sure that this boy had a heart of gold and would have done anything to help anybody. I had so many people contact me after he died. One girl said that, thanks to DeLondre, I'm still alive. She said she was going to commit suicide. DeLondre talked her out of it. I mean, just so many people contacted me with stories about him and what he did for them. And, it was just touching to see. And it, regardless of what he did in his life, it made me proud of him, proud that he's my son because he helped people. Regardless of anything he did wrong, I know what kind of heart that he had. I know that he wasn't out here in the streets trying to, kill people or corrupt, whatever. He was simply trying to make it. And it makes me sad for young Black men that I know there's a lot of them going through the same thing. I know there's a lot of young Black men who can't find a job because they have a felony and they turn to the streets. They turn to the streets and they start selling drugs because there's no other way that they can make it.
Did you start going along to other protests or meetings because of what had happened to Dre DeLondre?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, so what I'm saying is, so you've gone to the 2 days of protest or whatever it was for DeLondre in Winchester. Have you made associations with other groups and organizations or supporters of mothers or people that are going through a similar experience like what you're going through?
Oh, absolutely. After his death, I was just left with so many questions. I just started, scrolling on the internet, and I guess I got on Facebook, and I found a couple groups. I've joined many groups. I've talked to mothers. I've joined protests and marches, campaigns, events. We have an event every year for his birthday. We have an event every year on the anniversary of his death. I'm not going to let him be forgotten, and I'm not going to try to, let him be swept under the rug. And I think a lot of these deaths are swept under the rug. They're in the media for a few days, then it goes away. But I'm not going to let that town forget what happened to my son there. And, I know a lot of mothers. I've talked to them, and, it helps to talk to to mothers that have gone through similar situations, I mean, they all of them have honestly just truly been a blessing, because they actually, you know that you're talking to somebody who actually understands that pain,
Yeah.
and they have no answers, so they pushed me forward. I'm part of Coalition for Concerned Mothers. We've gone to the Capitol in DC and protested for his case, and I just rather I have to do it alone or however I have to do it. I'm not going to stop fighting for answers for him. And to answer Teresa's question about the FOIAs, yes, we filed those initially and they denied them, but we actually had to file the lawsuit for them to provide us with the evidence.
Donna Hayes is a legend in supporting mothers like you, Yolanda McNair. These are legends in this, Protect Our Stolen Treasures post and Stolen Lives, South Carolina, etc. And there's Candace Brewer. There are several. I mean, there are so many people to name. But Donna Hayes says, "Have you worked to tell your story about your son in another media outlet that will hear you? It will be a story that the kids can read." So tie up with Donna Hayes, who's currently on the thread, tuning in as we speak. There are other mothers on this thread who are tuning in as we speak, who have been through the same thing as you. And there's a common thread. I interviewed Donna a couple of months ago, and most of these women that you see on here have all been interviewed at one time or another, or are set to be interviewed on this particular show. But there's a common theme amongst all of these children that these women have lost, which I find absolutely startling, which is the level of intellect and interaction that they've had with their schooling. Some of them have talked about teachers who've come to their funerals and spoke on their child's behalf, and every one of these stories that we hear, we're hearing about young men in particular who are not in pursuit of criminal activity. They're not thugs, they are not gangbangers, they are not drug dealers, murderers and robbers. These are ordinary young men and women, sons and daughters of good men and women, who are caught up in some kind of a very strange merry-go-round that has our young men and women being shot to death at the hands of trigger-happy, corrupt and unscrupulous police officers, who then spend the rest of the time trying to taint their character and paint them out to be things that they're not, destroying the families and killing the mothers of those children. Because to me, it must be a painful experience to see your son's name coming up in print in the media, where they're talking about drugs and guns found on him, and they're trying to make them out to be gangbangers, or there's no. I think Jerry Summers have just said it. There needs to be transparency in all government, and yes, absolutely. Where there's no transparency, because that's the one thing that's missing from all of this, is the sheer transparency. I mean, if they were so convinced that Dre had committed suicide, why wouldn't they just come out with the evidence that they had in front of them that would point to him committing suicide?
Right. That's always been our question. There shouldn't be anything to hide if he simply committed suicide.
And you wouldn't.
There should be no reason why they wouldn't talk to the family.
No, and you wouldn't be 2 years down the line still trying to get something out of them. So
Right.
so for me, silence speaks volumes. In fact, sometimes silence can say so much more than a jabbering mouth.
Absolutely.
And their silence with you, because if they had the evidence that suggested that your son was the criminal or the suicide victim that they were trying to portray him as, they would just nail this, right?
Right. Right. And it's funny that, you know, they could release something to the newspaper about him having drugs and guns and felonies and all this. They can release that to the paper before they even explain to the family what happened. But he committed suicide. So why does it matter if he had guns? And, you know, why, you know, the media just, you know, they set it up so that the victim becomes the, you know, it's their fault that they're dead. You know, they were such a bad person. Oh my God, they deserve to die. You know, and I see that over and
so
over.
Before you have a chance to find out it was your son that was killed or murdered or committed suicide, if that's what they want you to believe, they had already released all of that information to the local press.
Yes, his body wasn't removed from that site until I believe midnight. You know, it was on Facebook. You know, his friends were saying that his body, you know, I lost it at like, he was killed at like 4:08, I think, the time they gave. And his body was out there till I think 12:30. And I just don't understand why he was out there that long if it's a suicide. They said his body wasn't covered up. You know, I've seen all the crime scene photos. I've seen the picture of the gun. I've seen the tasers. I've seen, you know, all of it. Things a mother should never have to see. You know, the autopsy, you know, all of it I've seen. And it doesn't make sense. Like one thing does not tie into another. And when you don't have, you know, you can never heal from a child dying, period. But when you don't even know why your child is dead and you're hearing this and you're hearing that, you know, you can never even begin to move on. You know, you can never have peace. You can't deal with your other children. You can't give them answers as to why their brother or sister or their mother or whoever is gone, because the police won't give us answers.
Would knowing the truth make it easier for you?
At this point, I mean, I really don't know. I mean, I would like to hear the truth, but I think as far as the pain of him being gone, it's going to be the same. Like it like literally, it hasn't gotten any easier from day one. It's only gotten harder with him being gone. You know, people talk about healing and go get counseling and things like this. I've tried it all. I've done it all. Nothing is going to take that pain away, and I know that. But you know, my goal is to fight for him because he can't fight for himself. He can't tell us what happened or what they did to him or why he ran or anything. He can't tell us. We can only listen to the media or the police, and we're not getting those answers. You know, so as long as I don't have an answer, I mean, I'll probably never know what the real truth is. They're not going to tell us anything other than what they already have. You know, all I can try to do is, you know, we have a wrongful death suit against them because they wrote it a suicide, or they said it was a suicide. You know, they're not going to charge any officers, so there will never be any criminal charges. You know, we'll never know what really happened. You know, so just the pain of him being gone, that's never going to go away. Knowing the truth, I just want his name cleared so that when his kids grow up, they can know the truth about their daddy and not think that their daddy was a bad person or that he intentionally left this earth, you know, at his own will, that he took his own life. that's why I push, because when his kids grow up, I want them to know that their daddy was a loving, you know, good-hearted man that would have loved to be in their life every single day. Like, it just made me so sad when I found out that he was going to have a son, because I feel like a son honestly would have changed his life. I really do. I think that maybe he would have pushed a little harder, because he knows how it is to be, you know, a son that wants, you know, a father to teach him how to play football. I taught my sons how to play football. You know, there's nobody there now to, you know, all these kids are being left with no fathers, and it's just, you know, it's going to change the way the whole world is. I mean, everybody's mentality is changing about, you know, police and about these deaths. You know, it's dividing everybody. So until, you know, there's some kind of law change for these police to actually be charged or even be suspended, you know, nobody was suspended in my son's case. No names of the officers were released. No, nothing. They never even, you know, they went home that night to their children, and they got up the next day and they came right back to work while my son's laying in the morgue. And I still had no answers, you know, and still to this day I don't. You know, so that's where it needs to change, is that, you know, that's why we have to push for accountability, because until we do, you know, we're not going to get any answers.
I want to introduce you to a friend of mine who's currently on the thread as we speak. And his name is Jerry Summers. And Jerry Summers is a former chief of police, and a very dear friend and a very regular guest on my show. And he says he would review the crime scene photos pro bono if you'd like a different set of eyes on the case. And
absolutely,
I would urge you to make contact with him and take him up on his offer, and he will give you a real bird's eye view of what he makes of this, which might be very helpful to you.
Okay, I'll definitely take you up on that offer. We've had a really hard time. We actually didn't bury my son until March 9th. Actually, the day before my birthday, we buried my son because we were trying to get a second autopsy, but, you know, we couldn't even get a lawyer because they were saying it was suicide, so nobody would take the case. But I will definitely get in contact with you, Jerry, and I appreciate, you know, your help.
And that's the fortunate thing of this network that we're building right here on Issues Today, is that there's a group of people here like Jerry. You've got people like Donna Hayes and Donna Chizese and Yolanda McNair and many others who, Latara Smith, who is a private investigator. You've got a lot of people on here who support this show and who follow these proceedings, etc., who have all been through one sort of incident or another, whether they've been a guest on this show to explain the circumstances, or they've been a guest on the show to talk about the loss of a loved one. But there is a network of people that's growing here that are going to be able to help. And it's the one thing that I love doing here is introducing these people to each other. Because I'm on the other side of the border, it's very difficult for me to do anything where I am, apart from give you guys this platform to be able to share your stories on. And we're sort of like, we're almost about, the last 5 minutes or so. Is there anything else that you want to bring forward here into this equation that we haven't yet covered?
I think, I mean, there's so many things that are wrong with this case that, I mean, I could probably go on forever. But just that I want people to know that, don't believe everything that you read in the media. The police intentionally feed the media misinformation. And as far as DeLondre, there's statements out there that supposedly I've made, that maybe I thought that he did commit suicide. Not really sure where those came from. I don't doubt my son and his love for life. I don't think he would ever take his life.
Well, at this point in time, Jacqueline Minifield Brown, I just want to say it was an absolute honor having you on this show. It was an honor and a privilege to use Issues Today as a platform to tell the story of Dre DeLondre Minifield. And I hope and I pray that you get the answers that you need, that you can get the peace that your family so much deserve, and Dre's passing will get the justice that God requires, because it's so sad. Each week we tell another story, and none of them are really far different than the other. You know, it's another mother crying for the loss of her son or her daughter. Families are broken and torn to pieces through the loss of a loved one. Characteristics and personalities and integrities are destroyed by the lies of law enforcement, who should be the ones that we should trust more than anything else. And there are some very powerful, as Donna Hayes has just said, powerful women like you who can stand on a platform and tell their story and get other people to listen, in the hope that this hope that you were talking about, this hopelessness that Dre was feeling when he was incarcerated for just defending the basic human right of an individual, which is not to be insulted in public. And I'm not going to justify him beating up on that guy. As people, we don't endorse violence of any type whatsoever. But we did explain how Dre could have found himself in that position to have retaliated once somebody deliberately calls him the N-word, trying to provoke a reaction. And it's one thing that we need to say here and now is, if you're going to be prepared to intentionally provoke someone, don't be surprised by the response that you get, because not everybody is going to be as controlled and disciplined as someone else. So, you know, sometimes you get what you ask for, and unfortunately, it was to change Dre's life forever, because up until that moment, Dre was a law-abiding, family-orientated, educationally minded individual whose future looked very, very bright indeed. And but for that one mistake, that one incident that cost him 18 months in prison, that was to turn his life forever. But for that moment, more than likely we would have still had Dre with us today. But I just want to thank you, Jackie, for sharing that story with us today. And I pray God will give you strength.
I thank you for having me on here. Anytime I can tell a story, I try to. And it's just an honor to be on your show. I wish there were more people like you. It's an honor to speak with you. You're awesome. Just thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about him. And I want to thank all the mothers the mothers are just awesome. And I will be in touch with you, Donna and Jerry.
Please make sure you do. It can help you go further and forward. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Well, for now, we're out of here. This is Kervin Julian signing out on Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio. I'd like to thank Jacqueline for sharing that story with us. And I'd like to thank all of you that have contributed, dropped in your messages, tuning in and listening and supporting in every way that you can. Next week, I've got Latara Smith. And please don't forget, September the 8th, we've got the United Nations Director. And I believe Donna Hayes, Jerry Summers, Jonathan Newton, Greg Greer, Yolanda McNear, Alex Salazar, and I think there's still more to book themselves in. Mark Clements, I believe, will be also be a guest on that show as well. We're going to have a real panel of individuals that are going to be trying to make a difference on September the 8th, and I'll keep you informed of that one well in advance. So make sure you get ready, and it's enough. It's bye from me. We're out of here.
Imperial Lounge presents an icon.
Reggae dancehall by the beach. to be held at Imperial Lounge, 2 to 14 High Street, Margate Seafront, Kent, CT9 180. To be held on the first Saturday of each month. Your host DJ Matt. Also rotating DJs, Roddy Boone, DJ Happy,
And Younger General.
Doors open 8 p.m. till late. Free entry all night. Music policy, reggae, dancehall, and a touch of soul. On the first Saturday of each month.
Reggae dancehall by the beach.
At the Imperial Lounge Margate. Do remember you can also get VIP and Shisha booking. More info on the World Jam Global website. That's www.worldjamglobal.com. Also www.imperialloungemargate.co.uk.
See you there.
It's the right thing you doing. Rebellious like Malcolm. 1, 2, 3, swing it.
Do you have an old sound tape or your favorite cassette tape that you want converted to CD or MP3 format? Do you need a demo CD, radio ad, a DJ or even a sound system for your wedding, birthday or special occasion? Then why not get in contact with KTR Records on 07931 152 448 or check out our website on www.ktrrecords.com. We have been in business since 2004 and also undertake community projects. So for your remixes, doublets and all your sound editing needs, why not contact KTR Records, official sponsor of World Jam Global Radio. KTR Records, coming your way.
Do you like music like this?
Great music all the time.
Or like this?
The music you love.
Maybe this.
Great music that makes you want to turn up the volume loud.
Or live chat like this.
Especially where human life is concerned. Surely, sooner or later, people will realize that lives actually matter.
Then you're in the right place. Keep it locked to World Jam Global, where music is harmony.
Music 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Yeah, you're my World Jam. Hotter than them.
See live schedule.
World Jam Global Radio. This is clarity.
Once again, I'd like to thank Jacqueline Minifield Brown for sharing this story with us right here on World Jam Global.
I already did my time.
Next week, my guest will be Latara Smith once again.
I already did.
And don't forget to look out for that date that we've given you, September the 8th. I haven't got a title for the show yet, but we've got the director of the United Nations.
I already did my time.
And a panel of cherished guests.
I paid for my
informed.
I already did my time. I paid for my
and ready.
Back in the day, I didn't really care about the system. It was all about survival. It was do or die. I had to
we're out of here.
Rivals. I was too young and foolish to stay.